The B-17 is dying. December 20th, 1943. 27,000 feet over Bremen, Germany. And Second Lieutenant Charles Brown, pilot, 379th Bombardment Group, is fighting to keep it in the air. The aircraft, named Year Old Pub, has been shredded. Flak, fighters. The nose is blown apart. The number 2 engine is gone. Number 4 is smoking. The tail gunner is dead. The ball turret gunner is unconscious. And Brown himself is wounded. Blood running down his face from shrapnel. And the aircraft is falling, losing altitude, 2,000 feet per minute. And Brown knows, we're not going to make it. Not to England. Maybe not another 10 minutes. And then something appears. Off the right wing, a Bf-109, German fighter, and Brown sees it, thinks, this is it, we're done. The fighter is going to finish us. But the fighter doesn't attack. It pulls alongside, matches speed, and the German pilot, Oberleutnant Franz Stigler, he's looking at Brown, making eye contact, and Brown sees the German pilot is gesturing, pointing towards Sweden, neutral territory, and Brown realizes he's not attacking, he's helping, escorting us, and Brown doesn't understand why. This German pilot, who should be shooting us down, collecting his kill, he's protecting us, flying wing, until we reach the coast, until we're over water. And then Stigler salutes, breaks away, disappears, and Brown, bleeding, exhausted, flies Ye Old Pub home, crash lands in England, and survives. And for 47 years, he wonders, who was that German pilot? Why did he spare us? And what would make an enemy in the middle of war choose mercy over duty? That question, it won't be answered until 1990, 47 years later, when Brown places an ad in a military magazine, searching for the German pilot who spared his crew. And Franz Stigler responds, and the two men meet, and Stigler explains why he didn't shoot. And the answer reveals something about honor, about humanity, about how, even in war, some men refuse to become killers, and how that refusal, that choice, can define a life and earn respect from the very people who should hate you most. Let me tell you about Franz Stigler, born June 21st, 1915, Regensburg, Germany. And Stigler grew up around aviation. His father was a World War I pilot, and young Franz, he loved flying, obsessed with it. And in 1937, age 22, Stigler joins the Luftwaffe, starts pilot training, and he's good, natural. And by 1939, when the war starts, Stigler is a fighter pilot, assigned to Jagergeschwader 27, Fighter Wing 27, and he flies combat missions, France, North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and he's successful. By December 1943, Stigler has 22 confirmed victories. 22. He's an ace, multiple times over, and he's respected by his commanders, his peers, and he's on track for the Knight's Cross, Germany's highest military honor. Just needs 6 more victories, 28 total. And on December 20th, 1943, Stigler is flying, defending Bremen, against American bomber formations. And that morning, before he takes off, his commanding officer, Oberstleutnant Gustav Rödel, tells him something Stigler will remember for the rest of his life. Rödel says, "You're a fighter pilot, not an executioner. You fight armed enemies, not helpless ones. And if I ever hear you shot a man in a parachute, I'll shoot you myself." That conversation, that moral instruction, it shapes everything that follows. Because later that day, Stigler will face a choice between duty and honor, between victory and mercy, and he'll choose honor at great personal cost. Now, let me tell you about December 20th, 1943. The mission. The US 8th Air Force is launching a raid. Target Bremen. industrial city, critical war production, and the bomber stream, it's massive. 300 B-17s, B-24s, escorted by fighters, P-47s, P-38s, and German defences scramble, every available fighter. And Stigler, he's among them, flying a Bf-109 G6, and he climbs to altitude, joins the formation, and the battle begins, chaotic, violent, fighters attacking bombers, escorts engaging fighters, flak bursting, aircraft falling, and Stigler, experienced, skilled, he engages, attacks a B-17 formation. From the front, head-on attack, high closing speed, and he fires, 2-second burst, 20mm cannons, and the bomber, it's hit. Engines smoking, falling out of formation. Stigler breaks away, resets, attacks another, same result, hit, damaged, falling. And Stigler, in that one mission, in maybe 30 minutes, shoots down 2 B-17s, maybe 3, confirmed later as 2, but possibly 3, and he's ecstatic. That's 24 victories, 4 away from Knight's Cross, 4, and he's low on ammunition, fuel, heads back to base, lands, refuels, rearms, and takes off again. Second sortie, same day. And this is where the day gets truly extraordinary, because Stigler, on his second sortie, he encounters another bomber formation, and he attacks. Shoots down another B-17, that's 3. 3 confirmed victories in one day, 3, and 70 American airmen on those 3 bombers, most of them dead. A few bailed out, most didn't, and Stigler, he's now at 25 victories, 3 away from Knight's Cross, 3, and he's searching for more targets. And that's when he sees it, a lone B-17, struggling, falling behind the formation, damaged. And Stigler thinks, easy target, number 26. He approaches from below, and as he gets closer, he sees. The aircraft is destroyed, nose blown apart, engines missing or smoking, tail shot up, and through the damaged fuselage, Stigler can see inside, can see the crew, wounded. One gunner, clearly dead, others not moving, and the pilot, visible through the shattered cockpit glass, bleeding, struggling with the controls, and Stigler realizes this aircraft is defenseless, no guns are manned, no one is shooting back, and Stigler lines up for the kill, his finger on the trigger, and he remembers Rodal's words, "You're a fighter pilot, not an executioner." And Stigler looks at the crippled bomber, at the wounded crew, and he makes a decision. He won't shoot, he won't kill helpless men, and instead he pulls alongside to inspect, to confirm they're really defenseless, and he sees the pilot Brown looking at him, terrified, expecting death, and Stigler, he doesn't shoot. He gestures towards Sweden, 200 miles, neutral, safety, and he flies wing, escorts the bomber past German flak positions, waves off German anti-aircraft crews who want to shoot, and Stigler, he's risking his life, his career, his honor, because if anyone reports this, he'll be court-martialed, shot for treason, helping the enemy. But he does it anyway, because it's right. And when they reach the coast over the North Sea, Stigler salutes and breaks away and flies home and lands and doesn't report the encounter, doesn't claim the kill, because it wasn't a kill, it was mercy. And he files his report, 3 victories, confirmed, and says nothing about the 4th, the one he spared. Now, let me tell you about Charlie Brown's experience, because this is critical. Brown is 21 years old, from West Virginia, and December 20th is his first combat mission, his first, and it's a disaster. The bomber stream is attacked, heavy, sustained, and old pub is hit, early, flak, then fighters, and the aircraft is damaged, badly, but Brown keeps flying, keeps formation, drops bombs on target, and turns for home, and that's when it gets worse. more fighters, and yeah, Old A Pub is hit again and again. The nose gunner is killed, waist gunner wounded, tail gunner dead, and Brown himself takes shrapnel to the face, to the shoulder, and he's losing consciousness, hypoxia, blood loss, and the aircraft falls behind, loses altitude, and Brown, he's barely holding on, barely aware. And then the German fighter appears, and Brown sees it, thinks, we're dead. The fighter will shoot us down. But it doesn't, and Brown, through the fog of shock, of injury, watches as the German pilot flies alongside, gestures, escorts, and Brown doesn't understand why. But he accepts it, flies towards Sweden, but realizes he doesn't have fuel, can't make Sweden, so he turns toward England, and the German, he doesn't stop him, just escorts until the coast, and then leaves. And Brown, he crash lands in England. Debriefing happens, and Brown tells them, a German fighter escorted us, helped us, and the intelligence officers don't believe him, think he's confused, concussed, hallucinating, and Brown insists, no, it happened, and the officers say, even if it did, don't mention it, don't tell anyone, because it sounds crazy, and it might cause problems, questions. So Brown stays quiet for decades and wonders, who was that pilot and why? Let me tell you about Franz Stigler's career after December 20th, because sparing Brown, it cost him. Not immediately, but eventually. Stigler continues flying, continues fighting, and he shoots down more aircraft, reaches 28 victories, qualifies for the Knight's Cross, and he's awarded it. March 1944, Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, Germany's highest honour, and Stigler, he's proud, but conflicted, because he knows if anyone had seen what he did on December 20th, he wouldn't be receiving honours. He'd be facing execution. And Stigler carries that secret for the rest of the war and after, and he never speaks of it to anyone. Because even after the war, in post-war Germany, sparing an enemy, it's complicated. Some would see it as weakness, treason, others as mercy. But Stigler, he doesn't want to explain, doesn't want to justify, so he stays quiet. Now, let me tell you about the American bomber crew's perspective, because this is important. December 20th, 1943. The Bremen raid. Of the 300 bombers that attacked, 27 were shot down. 27. That's 270 American airmen. Most killed, some captured, and the crews that survived, they report back, and they describe intense fighter attacks, skilled German pilots, aggressive, deadly, and among those pilots, one stands out in after-action reports. Described as particularly effective, shot down multiple bombers, coordinated attacks, and American intelligence compiles these reports, tries to identify the pilot, but can't, because German records are incomplete, classified, and after the war, no one follows up, because the war is over, and focusing on individual German pilots, it's not a priority, except for Brown. Brown never forgets, never stops wondering. Let me tell you about Oberstleutnant Gustav Rödel, Stigler's commanding officer, because Rödel is important to this story. Rödel was a World War I pilot, flew with Stigler's father, and Rödel had principles, strict principles, about honour, about combat, and Rödel taught his pilots, you are warriors, not murderers, you fight with honour. And that means no shooting parachutes, no strafing lifeboats, no attacking defenceless enemies. And Rödel enforced this strictly, and his pilots, they respected him, followed his example. And Stigler, he internalized these principles, made them his own. And on December 20th, when he faced the choice to kill or to spare, Rödel's teachings guided him, and Stigler chose mercy. And later, after the war, when Rödel learned what Stigler had done, He wasn't surprised. He said, "That's what I taught you. That's who you are. And I'm proud." Now let me tell you about the post-war years. Stigler, after the war, he emigrates to Canada, starts a new life, becomes a businessman, successful, and he tries to forget the war, forget the killing, but he can't, because he carries it. The memories, the faces, the bombers falling, the crews dying, and especially the one he didn't kill, the one he spared. And he wonders, did they make it? Did they survive? Did it matter? And he has no way to know until 1990. Brown, after the war, he stays in the Air Force, serves for 20 years, retires, becomes a diplomat, and he also carries the memory. The German pilot who spared him, who saved his crew, and Brown wants to find him, to thank him, to understand. And in 1986, Brown places an ad in a Combat Pilot Association newsletter, searching for the German pilot, describes the encounter, the date, the location, and he waits, and nothing, no response. And Brown tries again. 1989, another ad, more details, and this time someone sees it and forwards it to Franz Stigler, living in Vancouver. And Stigler reads it, and he's shocked, because after 46 years, the man he spared is looking for him, and Stigler hesitates, because revealing himself means admitting he disobeyed orders, helped the enemy, and even in 1990, even decades after the war, it's complicated, but Stigler decides. He writes to Brown and says, "I think I'm the pilot you're looking for." And he describes the encounter, details that only someone who was there would know. And Brown receives the letter, and he knows, this is him. This is the man who saved us. And they meet, 1990, Seattle, and Stigler and Brown, they sit down, face to face, for the first time since 1943, and they talk for hours, and Stigler explains why he didn't shoot, and he says, "I looked at your aircraft, and I saw you were defenseless, helpless, and shooting you, it wouldn't be combat, it would be murder, and I couldn't do it. My commander taught me honor matters, even in war, and I believed him, still believe him." And Brown, he's crying, and he says, "You saved my life, my crew's lives. 8 men, and I've thought about you every day for 47 years, and I wanted to thank you." And Stigler says, "No, thank you for surviving, for making my choice matter, because if you died anyway, it would have been for nothing, but you lived, and that means maybe honor still exists, even in war." That meeting, it's emotional, powerful, and the 2 men, former enemies, become friends, close friends, and they speak regularly, visit each other, and in 1992, Brown nominates Stigler for an award from the US Air Force. The Air Force doesn't have a formal award for enemy combatants, but Brown argues this man deserves recognition for honor, for mercy, for choosing humanity over duty, and the Air Force agrees, and in a ceremony, they honor Stigler, not officially, but publicly, and American bomber veterans attend, men who flew missions like Brown's, who lost friends to German fighters, and they shake Stigler's hand, and they thank him for showing that even enemies can be honorable. And Stigler, he's overwhelmed, never expected this, never imagined the people he fought against would honor him, but they do, because they understand. War forces impossible choices, and Stigler chose right, and that deserves respect. Now let me tell you about the technical details, because this matters. On December 20th, Stigler shot down 3 B-17s, confirmed, 3. Each B-17 carried 10 crew, that's 30 American airmen. And of those 30, most died. Maybe 25, maybe more. So Stigler, on that one day, killed 25 Americans, maybe more. And then he spared 10. The crew of Ye Old Pub, 10. So the math is 25 killed, 10 spared. And the question is, does sparing 10 erase killing 25? The answer is no, it doesn't erase, but it complicates. Because Stigler, he's not a villain, but he's not a hero either. He's a soldier who did his job, killed enemies, but also showed mercy when he could. And that duality, it's what makes him human and respectable. Let me tell you about the American crew Stigler shot down, because they're part of this story too. Of the 3 B-17s Stigler destroyed on December 20th, the crews, most of them died, but a few survived, were captured, became POWs, and after the war, some of them learned that the pilot who shot them down was the same pilot who spared Brown, and their reactions were complicated, some angry. He killed my friends, some understanding. He was doing his job, and some, they even met Stigler at reunions, and they talked, and most concluded he was a soldier, like us, fighting for his country. And yes, he killed our friends, but we killed his friends too, and that's war. And the fact that he spared one crew when he could have killed them, that shows character, and that's worth respecting. Now, here's the irony, the deep irony. If Stigler had shot down Ye Old Pub, if he'd claimed that 4th victory, he would have been one step closer to legendary status in Germany. One more kill, one more step toward becoming a top ace, and his name might be more famous today among military historians. But by sparing Brown, by choosing mercy, Stigler became something different, not famous among historians, but respected by the men he fought against. And that respect, it's deeper, more meaningful, because it's not about numbers, about victories. It's about character, about choosing right when it's hard. And that's what makes Stigler's story powerful, not what he did for Germany, but what he did for humanity. Let me tell you about the ripple effects. Brown's crew, the 8 men who survived Ye Old Pub's crash landing, they went on to live full lives, families, careers, children, grandchildren, and collectively, Brown's crew, they have, estimates vary, but roughly 40 descendants. 40. Children and grandchildren who exist because Stigler chose mercy. And those 40 people, they know the story, and they're grateful. And when Brown and Stigler reunited, some of those descendants, they met Stigler, thanked him. And Stigler, he's humbled, says, I didn't know, didn't realize. That one decision in 1943 would have such impact, would create so many lives. And that's the power of mercy. It doesn't just save lives, it creates futures. Now, let me tell you about honor culture, because that's what this story is about. Stigler was raised in a culture that emphasized honor, military honor, chivalry, and even though Germany, under the Nazis, violated that honor systemically through genocide, through atrocities, individual soldiers, like Stigler, like Rödel, they held onto it, personal honor, and they taught it, and they lived it. And Stigler's decision to spare Brown, it came from that culture, from the belief that war has rules, even unwritten ones. And one of those rules is you don't kill defenseless enemies, you don't execute, you fight. And when the fight is over, when the enemy is helpless, you stop. And that's what Stigler did. He stopped. And that act, it transcended war, transcended nationality, and earned him respect from everyone. Let me tell you about Stigler's later life. After reuniting with Brown, Stigler became something of a celebrity in aviation circles, at air shows, conferences, and he told his story repeatedly. And he always emphasized, I'm not special. I just did what I was taught, what I believed was right. And many soldiers, they face similar choices. and many chose mercy. I'm just one example. But his humility, it made him more respected, not less. Because he wasn't seeking glory, just telling truth, and people responded to that. And Stigler and Brown remained close friends until their deaths. Brown died in 2008, Stigler in 2008, 4 months apart. And at Brown's funeral, Stigler's family attended, and at Stigler's funeral, Brown's family attended, and they mourned together. Former enemies, now family. And that's the legacy, not war, but reconciliation. Here's the broader lesson. War creates enemies, but it doesn't have to create hatred. Soldiers on opposite sides, they're not evil. They're men, doing their duty, fighting for their countries. And sometimes in war, there are moments where humanity breaks through, where mercy is possible, and those moments, they matter. They remind us that even in the darkest times, in the most brutal circumstances, individuals can choose right, can choose mercy. And Stigler, on December 20th, 1943, he had that moment, and he chose right. And 70 years later, his choice is still remembered, still respected, still taught, as an example of what it means to be honourable, even in war. Let me bring this back to the beginning. The B-17, dying Franz Stigler, approaching, finger on the trigger, and the choice, kill or spare, duty or honour. And Stigler chose honour, and that choice, it saved 8 lives, created 40 more, and earned him respect. From the very people he'd fought against, from the nation whose bombers he'd destroyed. Because Americans, when they learned Stigler's story, they didn't see an enemy. They saw a soldier, an honourable soldier, who showed mercy when it mattered. And they honoured him, not with medals, not officially, but with respect, with friendship, with gratitude. And that's more valuable than any medal, because it's earned, not by killing, but by choosing not to kill, when you could have, when you were expected to. And Stigler, he made that choice, and it defined him, not as a German ace, not as an enemy, but as a man, an honourable man, who understood that war has limits, and those limits are defined by humanity. And Franz Stigler, on December 20th, 1943, chose humanity. And for that, America awarded him respect.